So now I've got a pretty big challenge for you. Our aim here is to create a simple email client that we could use as a mobile app, which allows the user to send an email to and from anyone they like. So when someone first uses the app, they might send to a new user, and then they can put their email address in there, the from email, a message, nice and simple, and then when they click send, that links via Ajax to a PHP script which then sends the email for them and returns true, and the app interprets this as a successful send. It also knows if, for example, there is no to field, that the email couldn't be sent. As well as that, the email addresses that are used automatically appear in the email address list here, and when the user clicks on them, it sets up an email to that email address. All of those are saved with HTML local storage, so they're stored permanently for the user. To give you a quick glance at what we're creating on the server side, we've got a fairly simple script which attempts to send the email and then creates some JSON, or more specifically JSON-P, to allow the app to read the response and know whether or not it's successful. So there's a lot to cover there, but I think you should be able to figure out at least most of that yourself. But of course, you're very welcome to watch me give it a go if you'd rather. Either way, best of luck. All right, I hope that went well. I'm going to start with the HTML side of the app and build up our user interface first, and then we'll create our PHP API when we're done. So I'm just going to Command Z all the way back to the app.js site that we had a couple of videos ago. There we go. Just make sure everything's still working. Great. So I think I'm going to go for the blue menu bar at the top. And I'm going to do that just by adding the class blue to the top bar there. And then I'll just get rid of everything that we don't need. So we don't need the scroll page. I'm going to leave the keyframes in. They might be important for one of these animations. And we're not going to be using the color picker. So I'm going to get rid of all of that. So pretty much all the styles, in fact, are gone. So let's get rid of our color picker, but we will be using the app section here with our app buttons. So let's get rid of all of those apart from one, and we'll change the data target to send email. That's what I'm going to call the div of my email sending page. And then we can keep this section as well, but this is still going to go to send email. And I'll just change the text to send to new user. Okay, and then we don't need page 2. In fact, we don't need any of these pages. And we don't need this code either. So let's just leave it with an absolutely minimal code base. Definitely don't want to leave any code in that we're not going to be using. Okay. Let's just update the title to send an email. Click below to send an email. It's a pretty simple proposition. Obviously, this lists section here is not going to be shown initially, but we'll leave that for now until we add all our local storage functionality. Okay, then as I mentioned, we're going to need the page from inputs here, which actually contains something pretty similar to what we're going to use to send our email. So again, I'm going to view frame source, and I'm interested in inputs. So let's Command F to search for inputs. There we go. So it's definitely called inputs. And here's the code that we need then for that. So let's copy that down and we'll have a look at it once we've copied it over. So this is an app page as we're used to. It's got a top bar. Let's rename that to send email. We might want to keep that button there. And then we've got search. We're definitely not interested in any search here. So I'm going to get rid of that line, but we'll leave the rest because we're going to want something pretty similar to that. And let's update the data page to send email. Okay, we should now be able to click on these and we get to the send email page. So let's now look at the send an email page in more detail. We're going to want a sender and recipient email address at the top there, and we can actually leave subject and message as they are. So let's call that sender email address, and we'll give it an ID of sender email. And then we'll have another section underneath with an input of recipient email. Okay, let's take a look. Great. So the first time the user runs the app, none of these will be pre-filled in. But once the user has sent an email, we want these to be saved. So let's add our code to do that. This is going to be in the send email page. So I'm going to copy the app controller code and add it for the send email page using the data page attribute there. And I want my code to happen when the send button is pressed. So let's first give this send button an ID. I'll call it send button. And then we want to run our code to set up the onClick function when the page is loaded. So we're going to use the send email attribute here. There we go. And as always, we take things one step at a time and just do a quick alert to make sure it's working. There we go. Hello. And then we want to do something if it's clicked. Now, we've seen some code from that down here somewhere. Here we go. So it's a little bit different to what we're used to, but I think it's fairly easily transferable. So we're looking to find an element again, but this time we're looking for the element with the send button ID. We're making it clickable, and then when it's click, we're running some code. And again, we'll just do a quick alert to make sure that the onClick method is all set up correctly. All right, let's give it a go. Wonderful. But of course, what we're really going to do here is attempt to send the email, but I'm going to add the code for that later on. For now, we're looking at our local storage, so let's make that happen. So let's start off by checking to see if local storage is available. So we look at type of and local storage, and we want to check that that's not undefined. And if it is, for now, I'll just put a message and saying that we'll alert the user that we couldn't save the data. It won't cause a problem with the email sending, it just will mean that we won't save their email addresses, etc. And then over here, we'll start off by saving the sender email address. Now that's nice and easy because there's only one of them. So let's just remind ourselves what we call that. So it's the sender email ID. So we're going to set local storage set item, and I'll call it the same thing. So sender email, and we want to set that to the value of the sender email field. So sender email again and .val. Now, before we move on to saving the recipient email address, I'm just going to check that that's all working. So we should be able to set up the email address here. So let's first check again to see if local storage is available. And I won't have an else this time. This time I want to check to see if a particular variable exists, and that is the sender email variable. So I'm looking for local storage .get item sender email, and I can check that that exists to see by checking if it's not equal to null. And if it doesn't, then I want to update the value of the sender email input, and we do that using page.find and then sender email with a hash for ID, and we want to set the value of that to local storage get item sender email. So all of that should have the effect of, when we save our local storage data, when the user clicks send, we then load up the page again and we should see the sender email address populated there. So let's give this a go. I'll just refresh, and then I'll click to open up the email, and then I'll put in rob@codestars.com and then click send. So nothing happens there, but hopefully the local storage got activated in the background. And then I'm going to refresh again and click back on here, and there we go. It's been populated. Wonderful. So we're now saving the sender email permanently. Just to clarify that that is the sender email, I think I'm going to add a from text and a to text there. Let's have a look. Yep, great. Okay, so now let's do the recipient email address. Now this is a bit more complicated because we need to save it in an array, and we only want to save it if it's not already there. So first off, let's see if that array exists. So we'll check to see if local storage get item, and then I'll call it recipient list. So if that's not equal to null, then we'll set recipient list equal to that. In fact, what I think I'll do is I'll set the recipient list to be a new array outside there, and then I'll just update it if it does already exist in the local storage. So now we've got recipient list as an array, and it's either equal to the contents of the local storage or it's empty. So now we want to see if the recipient email address is in the array. That's the sort of thing there's probably a jQuery function for. So let's have a look. Check to see if in array, something like that. Oh, look at that, in array. Perfect. So let's jump down for an example. So we've got in array, and then we're looking for the item there in the array there. Okay, so let's do our check. So we're checking to see if the recipient email, which is this there. So if, and we want recipient email dot val, and we want to see if it's in the array. So we're going to use jQuery dot in array. And we're checking to see if that value is in the array recipient list. And we actually want to check that it's not in the array here. And you can see here that the value that we get from the inArray function, if it's not in it, is -1. So we're going to check to see if that is equal to -1. And because I've written quite a lot of code so far, I'm going to do a check at this point that we're still working and nothing's gone too horribly wrong. So let's just put something in there. And we've got a small problem there. I think it's because we're using jQuery here, which was what the example had on our test up here. But actually the standard for using jQuery functions is the $. So let's try using that instead. There we go. It could be that Zepto doesn't support using jQuery and $. So if it's not in the array, we want to add it to the array. Hopefully you remember how to do this. We use recipient list dot push, and then the thing that we want to add. So that is, of course, recipient email dot val. And what I'm going to do next is just log to the console recipient list, just to make sure that this is happening. So for now I'm just going to put 1 and 2 and then inspect, and let's have a look. We should see that we've got an array, and yep, it's saving each one, but it's not saving recipient list each time. That's not a problem. That just means we need to save it to local storage. So remember, this is an array, so to save it we're going to have to convert it to JSON because we can only store strings in local storage. So we'll use local storage dot set item. The item that we want to set is recipient list, and the value that we want to set it to is JSON stringify and the recipient list array. And similarly, when we get it back, we're going to need to convert it from a JSON string to an array, and we can do that using JSON.parse, as we saw in the previous video. So now it should not only save the latest one, but save all of them. So let's save number 1. There we go, that's looking good. Now let's save number 2. Great, we've got 1 and 2. Number 5. Brilliant. So that's saving very nicely. One small thing I'd like to do while we're here is to put them into alphabetical order, so that the user's not looking down the big list of email addresses trying to find the right one. So let's see if we can find a way to do that. And we've got a few options here, but JavaScript array sort seems pretty perfect for us. So let's apply that here. So recipient list dot sort. Okay, so let's refresh, and then I'll put in the number 4 in my recipient list, and there we go. So not only has it added number 4, but it's put it in the right place as well. Just try number 3. Brilliant. Okay, so that's looking good. I do just want to get rid of those numbers so that we can replace them with email addresses. So I can do that just by commenting out this line once, and then refreshing. And I'm going to put my friend at example.com. There we go. And that's reset the array. So if I now bring that back in and refresh the page, my other friend at example2.com, and then save that, we've then got the 2 email addresses saved. Wonderful. So we're almost finished on the front end side. The only thing I want to add at this point is for the user's email contacts to be listed here. So let's remind ourselves where that is. It's up here. So it's in app section. Let's give this an ID of contact list. And then what we're going to want to do is when this page is loaded, want to check to see if the user has any contacts, and if so, make them appear there. So we're going to be doing that on the home page here. So once again, we want to check to see if local storage is available, which we do that way. And then we'll also check to see if local storage get item, and what we're looking for is the recipient list. Is not null. And so if that's the case, we want to get our recipient list again. So let's create our array. And in fact, we can use the same code here to parse it, convert it from JSON to an array. Then we're going to want to loop through that array. You can possibly remember how to do that. But let's just remind ourselves, there we go, the jQuery each function. Let's get ourselves a nice example. Yep, that looks familiar. So we're going to loop through the recipient list array. And yeah, for now, I'll just alert value. So that should mean that when we load the app, it will alert, there we go, my friend at example.com, and then my other friend at example2.com. Great. I don't actually want to alert them though. I want them to appear where it says lists at the moment. So I want to take the contact list ID and add a number of divs to it, one for each recipient. Let's get some indenting first off. So we don't want to alert the value, but we do want to just take the contact list. So that's there. And we want to append to that div, which you'll remember means add on the end. And we want to put the value in there. All right, let's take a look. And something's gone wrong there. I think it's because we're doing this the old-fashioned way. And we actually need to search the page with app.js. So we look in page and then find, and that's where we put our ID. So contact list. So just as we did it there. Let's try that again. There we go. Wonderful. And I'm just going to add in a little bit of code which hides the contact list if there's no contacts in it. So if the recipient list is empty, then we'll find the contact list in the same way and hide it. And just in case we need to, we'll show it there as well, because it might be that it's hidden and then we go back to it and we'll need to show it in that case. Great. So now back here, if we click on one of those, and at the moment nothing happens when we click those, And that's because when they were added in this way, the code attached to the data target field wasn't activated. So we're going to have to do that ourselves. And essentially we want to do two things when one of these buttons is pressed. We want to jump to the send email page, and we want to set the active email, the active recipient email that is, to whichever one has been tapped. So jumping to another page is not something we've seen how to do yet. So let's see if we can find it somewhere in the docs for app.js. Let's have a look. So we're familiar with that. Things to note, we're pretty familiar with. Pages, this is where we are. Aha! This code looks very promising. So that loads the page home. Wonderful. That's exactly what we need. So let's add a new class to these links. We don't need the data target attribute anymore. So if we just add a class of redirect, and then once we've finished this process, we'll add our redirect function to those links. So we're going to need to look in the page again and find anything with a class of redirect. And as we did down here, let's make it clickable and then on click. Just check it. We need parentheses there and then on click. And we want a function. There we go. And I'll just put those on separate lines to keep things tidy. We usually have the dot at the beginning. There we go. So again, just to check that everything's connected, we'll just have a quick alert. There we go. Things are looking good. So we want to do two things. Remember, we want to redirect. So app load home. Let's do that bit first, because that's the bit that we're a little unfamiliar with. And we want to redirect to the send email page. So let's have a look first off. Wonderful. And then the second thing we're going to do is use local storage to save the email address so that we can access it again on the send email page and put it there in the recipient email address. So let's use local storage, set item, and I'll call it recipient email. And we want to set that equal to the value of this div, which we should be able to get using this and then HTML. So that will give us the HTML of the div that was clicked, which is the email address that we want. Again, just to check, I think I'll do a quick alert that that's going to get it right. And I think both of those should happen before we redirect the page. Otherwise it might do the redirect and then not run our code. So let's check first of all. Excellent. We've got the data and then it's doing the redirect. So now we can get rid of the alert. And all we need to do now is add the code to make this recipient email address appear when the send email page is loaded. So we've already got a function here to check if local storage is up and running. So let's add our other function inside that. So now we're looking for local storage, get item, and the thing we want to get is recipient email. So let's check to see if that is not null. And if it's not, then we want to update the recipient email address. So we'll use page again to access the page and then find to find our recipient email, which I think is just recipient email, but let's just check. There we go, recipient email, yep. And then we want to set the value to local storage, get item, recipient, email. Brilliant. So now, oh, that's already worked. Wonderful. When the user clicks on one of these, it will save recipient email in local storage, and then if that exists, when we send an email, then it will update that other page. Wonderful. Just one tiny thing to fix. If we click send to new user now, then that will still remember the recipient email saved previously, which is not the behavior we want. So when the new user button is clicked, we need to remove the recipient email variable from local storage. So let's add an ID to that. I'll call it new user. And then we want to add some code for it. I'll do that once again inside the if local storage is defined if statement. So again, we want page find, and then I've forgotten already what I called it. New user. Very sensible. And then, not certain we need clickable, but I'll put it there anyway. And then on click, we want a function. And as usual, I'll do a quick alert to see if we're all connected up. We are indeed. And then ideally we want to remove that item from local storage, which is not something we've done before. So let's see if we can figure out a way to do it. Local storage, remove item. Aha, storage.remove item. That looks so perfect. I don't think we even need to click on it. And in fact, we've got the example in the second result there. So local storage.remove item. So let's try that. Remove item. And then the key is recipient email. And we do only want to do that if it exists. So we should do a quick check really. So if local storage dot get item recipient email is not equal to null, then remove it. Okay, so let's just check now. If we click send to new user, and that didn't quite work, and that's because the code to remove the item here is actually happening after the redirect takes place. So if we click done and then send to new user again, then we do have a blank email address here. So in order to stop that from happening, there's, as is often the case, a number of ways of doing it, but the way I'm going to fix it is to remove this data target from the app button class and then do the redirect manually. And so we'll check to see if we need to remove the item and remove it if we need to. And either way, we want to app.load the send email page. And this will just make sure that the item gets removed before the email page is loaded. So let's take a look. So now we've got it in the to field, and then we send to new user, and the to field is blank. So now our front end is working pretty much as we want it to. We've got our local storage saving our users' contact email addresses in vertical order, and they can click to send to one of those, or they can send to a new user. And either way, whatever email address they used last time is going to appear in the from field. So we're looking good. Now it's just the small matter of actually sending the email. And then of course, feeding back to our code here that the email has been sent. So to do that, we're going to need to use some PHP. We can't send email using JavaScript, but we can using a server-side language. So I've gone back over to FireFTP and I'm going to create a new directory, which is going to be 9 mobile apps. And I'll create a new file within that called sendemail.php. So I'm then going to use Command O or Control O in Windows to open that up in brackets. And then let's just do a quick save to make sure that we've got it open and then find it online. So it's going to be completewebdevelopercourse.com/content/9-mobile-apps/send-email.php. Of course, your URL is going to be different depending on your domain name. Okay, so we've got two challenges here. One, we need to receive the data from the app to tell us who to send the email to, who to send it from, and what the subject and message should be. And then we need to report back to the app to say whether or not the sending was successful. So we're going to be using Ajax within the app, and we'll need to return our data in JSON format so that it can be read across domains. So let's set up our mail function first. I think we can lose the app.js tabs, and I'm just going to do a quick search for PHP mail function, and then I'm going to jump to a Stack Overflow question. And here we go. So I've got some nice headers there. So usually getting the code from the web will save us a fair bit of time and get some accurate headers, hopefully, as well. So I'm going to be passing these as get variables. So we'll have 2 for 2, subject for subject, message for message, and then we'll be using from for from as well. There we go. So now I should be able to do a little test. I'm actually going to change that to an echo. So we'll see hopefully a 1 when this has been successful. So 2, I'll use rob@robpercival.co.uk, and from, I'll use rob@completewebdevelopercourse.com. And note, when you're testing, your emails are less likely to be seen as spam if you use a from address which matches the domain name. So do that if you can. So that will help with testing. If it doesn't appear in your inbox, then spam filtering could be the problem. And then we'll have subject. It's just going to be test, and message. This is a test. All right, so we've got a 1. That's a good sign. And just to show that it doesn't send absolutely anything, get rid of the sender email address and then reload the page. Then we don't have a 1 there. Okay. So that now seems to be working. So all that remains on the server side of things is to Outlook JSON-P so that we can read it using Ajax in our app. Again, that's something we haven't done before. So let's see how we do it. Here we go. How do I create JSON-P? That looks pretty perfect. Have a scroll down. And here we go. So we create a callback parameter in the get variable, then return that as part of our JSON. So let's copy this code over. So this is what we need, but we need to create our JSON first, and we'll do that from an array. So let's set up a result array, and we'll have result success equal to the output of the mail function, which will either be true or false, depending on whether it was successful or not. And then instead of using the data variable here, we'll use JSON encode result. And we've used the JSON encode function before, but it creates JSON from an array. Okay, so let's just have a quick look and see what that returns. So nothing at the moment because I haven't put the callback in there. So let's just set it equal to something, and there we go. Response, and then our JSON. And just in case there isn't a callback, I'll add some output there. Not that we particularly need that because it won't work without the callback anyway. But better to have that than nothing at all. Okay. So now we can shut down our send email PHP. And I'm going to put our code for the moment in the send email page. So as always, before I do anything, I'm just going to do a quick alert to make sure we're all connected up. And then I'm actually going to jump over to the Zepto page to get some code to work with for Ajax, just in case it's in any way different to the jQuery approach. If you want to stick with standard jQuery, of course, then you can get rid of Zepto and just add the jQuery JavaScript instead. But with any luck, here we go. This should work for us. So let's add our code. There, so we're used to the Ajax and get. The URL will start off just being this complete URL here with the callback in there. We'll leave the data as is for now. And then we should get a success field in the JSON. So we should be able to get that by just alerting data.success. And the final thing to check before we run this is to change from JSON to JSON-P. Now let's save that and refresh, and then there we go. We've got a false response, which is great. So next we need to send the correct variables to our script. So rather than just name is zepto.js, we need to send to, from, subject, and content. And I'm going to do that as just fixed variables for the moment. So I'll send it to rob@robpercival.co.uk. I'll send it from rob@completewebdevelopercourse.com. I'll set the subject to be test and the content to be just this is a test. Okay, so now when we run that, we should get a true response. There we go. Brilliant. So things are looking good. Let's then update our code so that we send the user's values of from, to, subject, and content rather than these fixed ones. So if you remember, those are stored up here. So we've already got an ID for sender email and recipient email. So let's just add in an ID for subject and also for content. And now we can refer to those down here. So the to variable is going to be recipient email dot val, and then I'll just copy that, and the from variable is going to be sender email dot val. Subject is going to be subject dot val, and content will be content dot val. All right, let's just run that again, make sure we're still getting a true response. And there we go. Actually, yes, that's correct. We're getting a false response because we don't have a recipient email address in there at the moment. So that's what we would expect. Okay, so now I'm going to move this string to send the email down to where it should be, so on this clickable link, i.e. when the send button is clicked. So let's take a look. Let's add an email address in here and a subject and a message, and then send. And there we go, we get our true response. All right, so we're very, very close now. It's just a matter of having a more friendly response to the user than alerting true or false. So we're going to do that in the usual way. We'll have an app section div at the top of the page, which will initially be empty, and we'll give that an ID of message. And notice that we do see a little bit of that div, so let's hide it when the page is loaded. So page find, and we want message hide, and then we'll just show it when we need to. Okay, so down here, instead of alerting data success, we're now checking to see if data.success is equal to true. Then we'll set the message div content to your email was sent successfully. And if it wasn't, we'll just put a fairly generic error message. Your email could not be sent. Please try again later. And we'll actually do the same thing down here if we get an AJAX error as well. Okay, and for each of those, we'll also have to show the div so that the user can see it. All right, so let's take a look. I'm actually going to go back and let's send to that example. Hi, how are you? And then send. Your email was sent successfully. Fantastic. So that's actually as far as I'm going to go with this app. Well done for following all the way through. I hope you did manage to do a fair bit of it yourself. What you've created here could be the basis of almost any HTML-based app, because what we've built is a nice looking and fluid front end based in HTML, and we've built a PHP backend as well, which for a more complex app could connect to a database and contain user login details or anything you like. So even though the usage here is pretty simple, the structure that we've used is extremely powerful. And I hope you're having ideas of apps that you could make in this way. There are, of course, many options for improvement here. One small bug you may have noticed is that if you attempt to send an email with a blank email address, it will save that blank email address in the list. So I'm going to leave that as a small challenge for you to figure out how to stop that happening. We also obviously don't have any validation on email addresses here, so we allow invalid email addresses. And we don't give a great deal of information in the error message as well. We just say the email could not be sent. So it'd be very nice to have some checking here to see that the email addresses were valid and that they were present and that there was a subject and a message. We could also do with giving the user the option to delete email addresses from their contact list if we wanted to. So plenty to do there, but also a strong basis for any app that you wanted to make. Once you've made your app though, the next challenge is to get it onto the app stores. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do using PhoneGap Build in the next video.